We've now got some content visible on the screen, but unfortunately we've also got this big warning message right here. So in this video, we're going to figure out what that warning message is all about and then fix it up. All right, so I want to show you two diagrams really quickly. The first diagram that we're going to look at is going to tell you what happens to our list when we are not providing a key property. So in other words, this is a situation that we are currently in, and this is not a good situation to have. So right now, if we were to say render our list of elements, so here's our list of elements right here, we've got all of our different friend objects, they would show up as some visible element on the screen of the device, and everything is pretty much a-okay. The issue starts to come whenever we start to change our original array of data. So let's say right here that we delete friend6, that object right there. If we delete that element or that object right there, you and I would expect to see friend6 disappear from the screen. And I can tell you without a doubt, friend6 would disappear. The issue when we don't provide that key is how our list gets updated on the screen. So if we do not provide a key, the way that React Native updates our list is it deletes everything visible on the screen. So it deletes friend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 entirely. It then looks at the new array of data and renders a single element for each one. So we'd end up with a situation like this right here. So the downside to this approach, just to be clear, is that React Native has to delete every element on the screen related to our list, and then rebuild the entire thing from scratch. That's not ideal. We don't want React Native to rebuild an entire list just because we made one little change to our array of data over here. What would be ideal, what we do want, is for React Native to detect that we deleted specifically that object right there, and we would want it to delete just that element, just friend6, and then essentially move up friend7 like so. That would be the ideal case, but again, that does not happen if we don't provide this key thing. So let me now tell you what happens if we provide the key. And I know we haven't really explained what the key is just yet, that's what I'm going to tell you right now. Okay, so the idea behind this key property is that it allows React Native to kind of track these different objects and detect when we delete one of them. When we delete one of these objects, React Native can then very easily say, oh, okay, I see that maybe we just deleted friend with 4 right here, or friend 4 right here, and it would then need to just delete that element that has a key of D. And then it could just move up friend 5 like so, and React Native did not need to rebuild the entire list from scratch. So what's the idea behind the key exactly, now that we understand kind of what it does? Essentially, the key right here allows React Native to tie the definition of some particular object of data, so in this case like friend 4, with some actual element that appears on the screen. So if we give friend 4 right here, this object, a key of D, React Native can create an element out of it, like this friend 4 that's visible on the screen, and tag it with that same exact key. So now React Native has kind of a mapping between this object and this element on the screen. And it knows that if we delete this object and it's no longer present inside of our data array, it knows exactly what element on the screen that it needs to clean up as well. So that's what the key does. It's really just allowing React Native to track the different objects we are passing in to try to render on the screen, and then automatically clean up some element that is visible on the screen whenever the corresponding object goes away. So the important thing to keep in mind here, number one, is that this key thing is primarily a performance optimization. And number two, it's a performance optimization around making updates to our list. Right now, we've got a static list of data. So technically, even if we add in this key property or this key thing, we're not going to really see any kind of performance increase because, well, we're not changing our original array of data right now. Nonetheless, React Native always assumes that we might eventually change that list of data, which is why it's showing a warning right here. Okay, so now that we understand exactly what's going on with this key thing, let's take a pause right here. When we come back to the next video, we're going to take a look at two different ways that we can implement that key property. In this video, we're going to take a look at two different ways that we can implement this key property and make this warning message go away. The reason I'm going to show you two different ways is that when you start to look at some documentation and blog posts and whatnot, you're going to very frequently see both of these different ways of adding in a key prop. Sometimes it's going to be really convenient to use one way, sometimes it'll be convenient to use the other way, and it's really going to be up to you which way to use. Okay, so let me show you the first way we can do this. The first way to add in a key prop and allow React Native to essentially associate one of these objects right here with what appears on the screen is to find these original objects, and to each object, we're going to add in a key property. The requirement of a key property is that it must be a string. It must be consistent between renders, and it must be unique compared to all the other objects inside of our array of data. So in this case, I might put in a key right here of just like 1. And notice how 1 is a string. If we put in a key as a number, we're still going to get a warning message because it has to be a string, not a number. Then on the next one, I could do a key of 2 and essentially repeat the process going down. So I'm going to just copy paste here really quickly. And I'll update each one to be unique. Okay, so now if I save this, the warning message goes away because now we are providing that key property. So this is the first way that you might see a key being designated for a FlatList element. Essentially, we add in a key property to each of the original objects. The only requirement, once again, is that it must be a string and it must be unique compared to all the other elements inside the array. You'll notice that if we change, say, key number 2 right here to be 1 as well, we now have 2 elements with a key of 1. This is going to confuse React Native. Because remember, it's essentially using that key to tie some object to some element that gets displayed on the screen. So if there are 2 elements on the screen with the same key, and 2 objects inside of our array, if we now delete one of these objects right here, React Native is going to say, hey, well, now there's no longer a key of A appearing twice, so which one of these 2 should I delete? And it gets really unclear to React Native as to which one of these it should clean up. So let's try this out. I'll save this with the 2 identical keys, and you'll very quickly see a warning message here that says 2 identical keys of 1. And it tells us very distinctly these keys have to be unique. Okay, so I'll change that back to key 2, and the warning goes away. Very good. All right, so that's method 1 of defining our key prop. I'm now going to show you method 2. So I'm going to delete all these extra key properties that I just added on. Okay, and I'm back to the code I had before. So the second way of defining this key property is on our FlatList component itself. On the FlatList component, I'm going to add in a new prop of key extractor. I'm going to pass this thing a function. This function is going to be called many different times. It's going to be called with a single argument that we're going to call friend. So this friend argument right here is going to be first this object, then this object, then this object, and so on. So our key extractor will be called with every object inside of our array. Inside this function, we have to inspect that object and then return the key property to use for it. So the only difference here is that now we're going to essentially define our key property kind of like at runtime right here when we pass our data into FlatList, as opposed to kind of ahead of time on our list of friend objects. So once again, we can return some unique character or some unique string that is consistent across re-renders of our list. So in this case, we might try using, say, our name property. Notice how the name property is a string, so that suits requirement number 1 of being a key, and it's unique compared to all of the different objects inside of our array. So this name property would be perfect to use as a key as well. It doesn't have to be a number that, or a string that contains a number. It can be any string of characters. It just has to be unique. That's the only requirement. So from key extractor, we could return friend.name. So now we're using that name property as our key. So now I can save this, and once again, we no longer see that warning message. All right, so once again, that's 2 different ways to solve this key issue. You're going to see both methods used very frequently inside of documentation. In this course, you and I are going to kind of favor this key extractor approach because it's one tiny line of code, and it doesn't require us to modify these original objects right here. In general, whenever we're working with some data like this, some array of objects, we really want to keep just the data related to that object inside the object itself. So what I mean by that is right now we have an array of friends. So all these objects should really only contain data related to being a friend. In this case, it just means it has a name. If we start to add in a new key property, then we're starting to tie some information from the view side of our application, like what appears on the screen, to our data objects, which is generally not a very good approach. So like I said, we're going to favor this key extractor approach as much as possible inside this course. All right, so now we've got this problem fixed up. Let's take a quick pause right here and continue in the next video. In this video, I want to show you 1 or 2 more quick things around this FlatList component. So to get started, I want to make sure that my FlatList component spans off the very bottom of the screen. Right now on both Android and iOS, all these different friends are kind of compacted up to the very top, and so on Android, as we saw a little bit ago, I don't even get any ability to scroll through these elements, because there's just not enough content here. So in order to make sure that the list spans all the way past the bottom of the screen, we can add in a property or some styling to this text element right here. So we're going to make sure that the text element has some extra spacing above and below it to make sure that the list is tall enough that it goes off the very bottom edge. So to do so, I'm going to go down to the bottom of the file and find my styles object. I'm then going to expand that object and add in a text style property once again. Then inside of here, I'm going to add in a margin vertical property. This is going to apply some spacing above and below every text element that we display. So for margin vertical, I'm going to add in like maybe 50 or so. We can then apply that styling rule to our text element right here. Remember, by just creating a style object as we did right here, nothing happens right out of the box. We have to very manually wire up the style that we just created to some element returned from our component. So I'm going to find my text element. I'm going to add in the style prop. I'll put in my curly braces, and then we'll do styles.textStyle. As a second reminder, I just want to mention again very quickly, the name of the style object that we create right here, so in this case text style, it doesn't have to actually match up or correspond to the name of the element whatsoever. We could put in gibberish right here if we wanted to, like ASDF. It just has to be the same when we actually try to use it up here as well. But in general, I like to use something like text style or just simply text if we're trying to apply some styling to a text element, because it makes it really easy for us to glance at the style sheet right here and understand where each different style is being used. Okay, so let's save that and see how we're doing. Okay, so now my list has a ton of additional vertical height to it because we added in some spacing above and below every text element. So now we can very easily scroll through this list of items, and it definitely goes down beneath the bottom of the screen. And then on Android, we've got something very similar as well. So over here, I can scroll around too. Okay, so there's two additional props that I want to show you related to the flat list. We're going to eventually use these different props in a future application that we work on. So for right now, I just want to show them to you and let you know that they exist. So the first prop I want to show you is the horizontal prop. If we just add in the word horizontal to a JSX tag like so, that is equivalent to writing out horizontal equals true inside of curly brackets like so. By adding in this horizontal prop, or better yet, its shorthand by just writing out the word horizontal, we're essentially telling our list that we want it to scroll horizontally across the screen from left to right as opposed to up and down. So if I now save this, we're going to see our list laid out from left to right. Now we can scroll horizontally through it. Same thing on Android as well. Now the second prop I want you to be aware of, you'll notice that on both iOS and Android, and this is kind of hard to see, but if you look down at the very bottom of the screen as I scroll through that list, you'll notice that there's a little scroll bar down there. So right there above my kind of software buttons, when I scroll, yeah, there's the scroll bar. Same thing on iOS as well. All the way down at the very bottom, I got that little list of elements. So in many cases, we might want to hide that scroll bar and make sure that it's not visible to the user. So to disable that scroll bar, we can add in horizontal, or excuse me, shows horizontal, there we go, scroll indicator, very long term right there. Make sure you've got the correct spelling and capitalization all the way through, and we'll set that equal to false, like so. So that's going to keep that scroll bar from appearing when we scroll through our list of items. So if I now save this and I scroll through, no longer do I see that scroll bar appear at the very bottom. Same thing on Android as well. Now in many cases, like right now, it might seem like, well, who cares about that horizontal scroll? But you're going to notice that in a lot of different mobile applications that you might use on an everyday basis, whenever you scroll through a horizontal list of items, having a scroll bar on there is actually really distracting. And so there are many cases where we might want to show a horizontal list and hide that scroll bar. And essentially that's how we do it. As I mentioned, we're going to work on an application in the future where we're going to have to make a horizontal list, and we're definitely going to want to disable a scroll indicator on that application we built. Okay, so that's pretty much it for right now. For FlatList, we now know how to show a list of elements to our user. So let's take a pause right here. In the next video, we're going to start to move on to our next little mini application.